The laughter started the moment the lawyer finished reading the will. I was still holding the thin envelope when my cousins began whispering, then chuckling, and finally laughing out loud as if someone had just told the greatest joke of the year. While they inherited my grandfather's $40 million estate, his fleet of vintage yachts, and even a small private island in Maine, I received only one thing: a plane ticket to Monaco. My cousin Bridger nearly fell out of his chair laughing. He clutched his stomach, wiping tears from his eyes. "Wait, that's it," he said, barely breathing between laughs. "Grandpa sends Ethan on a vacation?" The room filled with snickers. My cousin Waverly, dressed in a designer black outfit worth more than my old car, tilted her phone slightly to keep herself centered in the camera. She had been live-streaming the funeral earlier for her followers. "Well," she smirked, "at least you get frequent flyer miles." I folded the ticket quietly and slid it into my pocket. They didn't understand. Honestly, neither did I. Because my grandfather, Aldrich Payton, wasn't the kind of man who did things randomly. He had built half the luxury skyscrapers in Manhattan. Every decision he made was calculated. Precise. So why would he leave me a plane ticket? The funeral itself had been exactly what people expected from a billionaire's farewell. Black limousines lined the long driveway of his Connecticut mansion. Powerful politicians, famous investors, and media figures arrived one after another. Bridger stood at the entrance greeting everyone like a king welcoming subjects. "Senator Walsh, thank you for coming," he said smoothly. Meanwhile Waverly cried dramatically for the cameras, until the live stream ended, and she immediately checked her phone for likes. That was my family. I stayed mostly in the background. Growing up, my grandfather had always kept me at a distance. I visited him less than my cousins did, spoke to him less, and rarely understood what he thought about me. But I still respected him. Which is why the plane ticket kept bothering me. That night I unfolded the envelope again. Inside the ticket was a short handwritten note in my grandfather's sharp handwriting. "Trust the journey. Monaco. 24 hours. That was it. No explanation. No instructions. Just a destination. And strangely, it felt important. So the next morning, while my cousins celebrated their fortunes, I boarded a flight to Monaco with nothing but a suitcase and questions. 24 hours later, I stepped into the Monaco airport. And that's when a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit approached me. He leaned closer and whispered 7 quiet words. "Your grandfather believed you were the one." My heart stopped. Because at that moment, I realized the plane ticket wasn't the inheritance. It was a test. And I had just taken the first step. But what I didn't know yet was that the real secret my grandfather left behind would turn my entire family upside down. And the man standing in front of me was about to reveal the first clue. The man standing in front of me looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not an airport terminal. Tall. Perfectly pressed suit. Calm eyes. He extended his hand. "Mr. Ethan Payton." I shook it cautiously. "Yes. My name is Victor Laurent. I handled certain international affairs for your grandfather." I frowned. My grandfather had lawyers for that. Victor gave a small smile. He had lawyers for the public matters. A short pause. I handled the private ones. Before I could ask anything else, he gestured toward the exit. "Please follow me. We don't have much time." Outside the airport, a sleek black car waited at the curb. The driver opened the door without a word. As the car moved through the narrow Monaco streets, skyscrapers and luxury yachts flashed past the windows. I finally broke the silence. "Why am I here?" Victor didn't look at me. "Because your grandfather wanted to know if you deserved what he left behind." I stared at him. "My cousins already got everything." Victor turned his head slowly. That's what they believe. My heart skipped. What does that mean? Instead of answering, he handed me a small sealed envelope. Your grandfather prepared 6 steps. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single card. Step 1, arrive in Monaco alone. Underneath it, another message written in my grandfather's handwriting. If you are reading this, you chose curiosity over comfort. Good. Victor spoke again. The rest of the instructions are not written. So how do I know what to do? You don't. Another short silence. Your grandfather believed the best decisions are made without instructions. The car stopped in front of a massive harbor filled with shining yachts. Victor pointed toward one of them. It was enormous. White. Elegant. The name painted across its side made my stomach tighten. Aurora. My grandfather's yacht. Victor nodded. You have 1 hour. For what? To convince the board of Peyton Global that you deserve control of the company. I almost laughed. You're joking. Victor's voice remained calm. They are already inside. I looked toward the yacht. Through the windows I could see several silhouettes sitting around a long table. Executives. Investors. People who had known my grandfather for decades. People who probably thought I was just the quiet grandson who never showed up. Victor opened the car door. Your grandfather told them you might come. Might? If you didn't board that plane, the company would automatically transfer to Bridger. My chest tightened. So this is a competition. Victor shook his head. No. A small pause. This is the first test. I stepped out of the car slowly, staring at the yacht. The board members were waiting. The most powerful people in my grandfather's empire. And I had exactly 1 hour to convince them I belonged there. But as I walked toward the dock, Victor said something that stopped me cold. Mr. Peyton. I turned. His expression had changed. Your cousins just found out where you are. My stomach dropped. And they are already on their way to Monaco. The game had officially begun. But what none of us knew yet was that my grandfather had hidden a second test inside the first one. And before the night ended, someone in that boardroom was going to betray the entire family. The wooden deck of the yacht felt strangely quiet beneath my shoes. Inside the glass cabin, I could clearly see them now. 7 people sitting around a long polished table. Men and women who had built my grandfather's empire alongside him. Billion-dollar decisions were probably made in that room. And now I was expected to walk in and convince them I deserved to lead. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The conversation stopped immediately. 7 pairs of eyes turned toward me. A tall silver-haired man at the head of the table leaned back slightly. Ethan Peyton. His voice was calm but firm. Richard Hallberg, he continued. Chairman of Peyton Global's board. I nodded. I know who you are. Another board member adjusted her glasses. You have exactly 1 hour, she said. Your grandfather's instructions. I looked around the table. So, this is an interview? Richard shook his head. No. A short pause. This is a judgment. The room fell silent again. Finally a younger executive spoke. Let's start simple. He folded his hands. Why should we trust you with a $40 billion company? I answered honestly. You probably shouldn't. A few eyebrows rose. But if you're asking why I'm here, it's because my grandfather wanted me here. Richard leaned forward. That's not an answer. Then let me ask you something, I replied. The room grew slightly tense. What did my grandfather actually tell you? Richard exchanged a glance with the others. Then he said something surprising. He told us to listen to you. Another board member added quietly. And to watch how you think. I walked slowly around the table. My cousins think this is about inheritance, I said. It isn't. The woman with glasses spoke. What is it about then? Legacy. A short silence. My grandfather built Peyton Global from nothing. If he wanted to give control to Bridger, he would have. Richard studied my face carefully. So what would you do differently? I stopped walking. I'd start by asking why half of our international projects have been delayed in the last 6 months. The room suddenly became very still. One executive shifted in his seat. Richard narrowed his eyes. How do you know that? I met his gaze. Because my grandfather used to send me the reports. The silence grew heavier. Then I added quietly. And according to those reports, someone in this room has been leaking information to a competitor. The atmosphere instantly changed. Chairs creaked. People exchanged uneasy looks. Richard slowly stood up. That's a serious accusation. I know. Another executive suddenly spoke, voice tense. Do you have proof? I reached into my jacket pocket. Yes. 7 faces stared at the small envelope in my hand. My grandfather left this for the board. Richard's expression darkened. Why didn't you show it earlier? Because, I said calmly. I wanted to see who looked nervous first. At that exact moment, someone at the table stood up suddenly. Too quickly. And everyone in the room realized the same thing. The traitor had just revealed himself. But before anyone could react, the door behind me burst open. And a familiar angry voice echoed through the yacht. Ethan. I turned slowly. Bridger had arrived in Monaco. And judging by the furious look on his face, he already knew about the test. What he didn't know yet was that the secret inside the envelope was about to destroy everything our family owned. Bridger stormed into the yacht like he owned it. His expensive shoes echoed sharply across the wooden floor as he walked straight toward the table. This meeting is over, he snapped. The board members looked at him with visible annoyance. Richard Hallberg folded his arms. Mr. Bridger Peyton, this is a private session. Bridger laughed coldly. Private? I'm the primary heir of Peyton Global. He pointed at me. And whatever little game my grandfather planned for Ethan ends right now. I remained calm. That's interesting. Bridger turned to me. What is? You said primary heir. A short pause. Not owner. The room grew tense again. Richard spoke slowly. Mr. Bridger, your grandfather left specific instructions. Bridger slammed his palm on the table. My grandfather is gone. His voice echoed inside the cabin. And this company belongs to the family. One of the board members quietly replied. Yes. That's exactly why we're here. Bridger's eyes moved toward the envelope still in my hand. What's that? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around the table. 7 faces waiting. 7 powerful people watching every move. Then I placed the envelope in the center of the table. My grandfather left this message for the board. Bridger tried to grab it instantly. Richard stopped him. Sit down. Bridger glared at him. But something in Richard's expression made him pause. Slowly, reluctantly, he sat. Richard opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single folded letter. He read the first few lines silently. Then his expression changed. The confidence on his face slowly faded. Another board member asked. What does it say? Richard took a slow breath. It says, one of us has been secretly working with Volaris Holdings. The name hit the room like thunder. Volaris was Peyton Global's biggest competitor. The executive sitting near the window suddenly shifted in his chair. Richard continued reading. Over the past year, confidential project data has been leaked. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then Richard read the next line. And the proof is attached. Every head turned toward the envelope. Richard slowly pulled out a small flash drive. The room felt colder. Bridger frowned. This is ridiculous. I looked directly at him. Is it? Bridger's jaw tightened. Richard turned toward the large screen mounted on the wall. He plugged the flash drive into the system. A few seconds later, files appeared on the screen. Emails. Transfer records. Confidential project documents. And one name repeated again and again. The executive near the window suddenly stood up. Wait. His voice was shaky now. This isn't what it looks like. Every eye in the room locked onto him. Richard's voice became dangerously calm. Mr. Collins. The man's face had turned pale. Would you like to explain why millions of dollars were transferred to your private account? Collins swallowed hard. Bridger looked stunned. This has to be fake. I shook my head slowly. No. A quiet pause. My grandfather confirmed everything before he died. Collins took a step back. You don't understand. But before he could say another word, Richard signaled security. 2 guards entered immediately. And just like that, the man who had helped run my grandfather's empire for 20 years was escorted out of the room. The door closed. Silence returned. Richard turned toward me. You exposed the leak. I shook my head. No. Another pause. My grandfather did. Richard nodded slowly. Then why did he send you? Before I could answer, Victor's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Peyton, you should come outside. His tone sounded different. Urgent. I stepped onto the deck. Victor pointed toward the harbor entrance. 3 black helicopters were flying toward the yacht. Fast. My stomach tightened. What is this? Victor's face was serious. Your cousins. The helicopters were getting closer. They didn't come to watch the test. A short pause. They came to stop it. And that's when I realized something terrifying. My grandfather hadn't created one test. He had created a war for control of the empire. And the next move was about to change everything. The sound of helicopter blades grew louder over the harbor. Wind whipped across the deck of the yacht as the first helicopter circled above the water. Board members rushed toward the windows inside the cabin. What is happening? One of them asked. Victor remained calm beside me. Your cousins move quickly. I stared at the approaching helicopters. How did they even know I was here? Victor gave a small sigh. Money buys information. One helicopter lowered slowly toward a nearby landing platform along the dock. The door slid open. Bridger's younger brother, Marcus, stepped out first. Behind him came 2 lawyers, and several security men. Marcus walked toward the yacht confidently. Bridger appeared beside me on the deck, his expression dark. You think you're clever, he said quietly. I didn't invite them. He laughed. No. But Grandpa did. That caught my attention. What do you mean? Bridger leaned closer. You really think this was only your test? Inside the cabin, Richard and the other board members were watching everything through the glass. Marcus reached the yacht and stepped aboard. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. Richard opened the door. This meeting is private. Marcus smiled politely. Not anymore. One of the lawyers handed Richard a document. Richard read the first page and frowned. What is this? Marcus folded his arms. My grandfather left another clause in the will. The room grew tense again. What clause? Richard asked. Marcus looked directly at me. If any Peyton family member attempts to claim control of Peyton Global alone, the rest of the family may challenge that claim. Richard looked confused. This document allows a family vote. Bridger smiled slightly. Marcus continued. And there are 3 of us. The meaning was clear. 3 cousins. 1 vote each. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So let's make this simple. He pointed toward me. Why should the company belong to him instead of us? Silence filled the room. The board members exchanged uncertain looks. Bridger spoke calmly now. Grandpa loved games. A short pause. But he also believed in competition. Marcus nodded. So let's compete. I looked at Richard. What exactly are they proposing? Richard read further down the document. His eyebrows slowly lifted. Well, this just became much more complicated. What does it say? I asked. Richard looked straight at me. It says the final decision will be made tonight. Tonight? Marcus smiled. At midnight. Bridger added quietly. Whoever proves they understand Peyton Global the best, takes control. The tension in the room rose instantly. 3 cousins. 1 empire. 1 night. Richard closed the document. This isn't a normal business decision anymore. Marcus shrugged. It never was. Victor stepped closer to me and spoke softly. Your grandfather planned this very carefully. I looked toward the harbor lights flickering across the water. So what's the test? Victor pointed toward the city skyline of Monaco. Your grandfather left 3 sealed challenges. A pause. 1 for each of you. My stomach tightened. And whoever solves their challenge first, wins. Bridger smiled confidently. Marcus leaned back comfortably. They both looked completely certain they would win. But Victor leaned closer to me and whispered something that made my heart race. There's one thing they don't know. What? Victor's voice dropped even lower. Your grandfather hid the real challenge inside yours. I stared at the envelope Victor handed me. Because if he was telling the truth, then the test I was about to open wasn't meant to win the company. It was meant to reveal something far more dangerous hidden inside Peyton Global. The envelope in my hands suddenly felt heavier than it should have. 3 cousins. 3 challenges. 1 empire worth billions. But Victor's words kept echoing in my mind. Your grandfather hid the real challenge inside yours. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter and a small silver key. Bridger watched impatiently. Well? What does it say? Marcus leaned forward. Read it. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. My grandfather's. I read it silently first, then aloud. If you are reading this, Ethan, it means you chose the harder road. The room fell quiet. You were never meant to compete with your cousins for my company. Bridger frowned. What? I continued reading. Peyton Global is strong, but something inside it has been rotting for years. The board members exchanged worried looks. My investigations revealed corruption, illegal deals, and powerful enemies hidden behind the company's success. Richard's face slowly tightened. What is this? I finished the next line. The true heir of my legacy is not the one who controls the company. A pause. But the one who protects it. The room went completely silent. Marcus shook his head. This makes no sense. But the letter wasn't finished. The key inside this envelope opens a private vault in Monaco. Victor nodded quietly. A vault your grandfather kept secret. I read the final paragraph. Inside that vault is evidence powerful enough to destroy Peyton Global, or save it. Bridger stood up immediately. This is ridiculous. Marcus looked confused. So whoever opens the vault wins? I shook my head slowly. No. Another pause. The person who decides what to do with the evidence becomes the true leader. Richard leaned back in his chair. Your grandfather created a moral test. Victor added quietly. He wanted to know who would protect the company, not exploit it. Bridger scoffed. Then let's go open the vault. Marcus nodded. Yes. Right now. But I didn't move. Instead, I looked around the room. 7 board members. 2 cousins. Victor standing quietly near the door. You're all assuming something, I said. Bridger frowned. What? That the evidence inside the vault only affects Peyton Global. Richard slowly straightened in his chair. What are you implying? I held up the letter again. Grandpa wrote one last line here. Marcus crossed his arms. Then read it. I looked down at the paper. And spoke the final sentence. If the truth inside the vault ever becomes public, several governments, corporations, and powerful families will fall with it. The room froze. Richard whispered quietly. My God. Bridger's confidence finally cracked. Marcus stared at the letter. Victor looked at me calmly. You see now. The inheritance was never the yachts. Never the money. Never even the company. It was something far heavier. A choice. Expose the truth and destroy the empire. Or bury it and protect everything my grandfather built. 3 cousins stood in silence. The harbor lights shimmered outside the yacht windows. And somewhere in Monaco, a hidden vault waited to be opened. But as I looked at the key in my hand, one final thought crossed my mind. Because the real question wasn't who would control Peyton Global. The real question was the truth worth destroying an empire for?